I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is one of my favourite Audi Sport products, the RS5 Sportback. A fast Audi is usually a pretty cool car, but the Audi Sport range is now vast. There are some high highs and there are some not so highs in my opinion, but this RS5 Sportback is one of this part of Audi's absolutely premier products. In today's video, I'm going to explain why I'd have this any day over a V8 63 or the new M3. It is such a polished product, and spoiler alert, this is not sponsored by Audi in any way. It's just that this vehicle is so well suited to the kinds of fast country roads that we have here in Australia that it is a joy to live with. But what is the RS5 Sportback? Well, it sits at the top of the Audi A5 lineup. The A5 comes in coupe, convertible and sportback form factors, but you can only get an RS5 as a coupe with 2 doors or this sort of 5-door sportback. There's a big hatch at the rear, and I'm going to show you how this makes this vehicle quite practical. Now, it runs on the same MLB architecture as a whole bunch of Audis and Volkswagens and other brands within the group, but it effectively is a sportback alternative to the Audi RS4 station wagon. Now, the RS4 wagon is a cult classic, an absolutely awesome car, but because this thing isn't a sedan, it's got a big hatch, it actually makes it almost as practical as the RS4, and I'll check that out with you guys a little bit later in the video. We'll do our usual thing though, we'll have a look inside the vehicle, we'll check out the back seats and install some baby seats to show you that this actually can be family motoring if you need it to be. We'll have a look in the boot, discuss the running costs, and then head out on the road in this RS5 with its 2.9 litre twin turbocharged petrol V6 engine to see how it runs. But before we get started, hit subscribe below the video and the notification bell. Stepping inside the Audi RS5, you find a design which is pretty clean and simple and fairly sumptuous, and you'd hope so given this car is over $150,000 before on-road costs. We're sitting in these really cool RS specific seats which do have fine nappa leather. These ones are black with red stitching, although you can order tan on this car as well, which is pretty nice and probably what I would do. The seat is quite comfortable, the back support is good. I just think there needs to be a little bit of extra thigh adjustment for drivers with longer legs, but I was able to get pretty comfortable. The seats have heating and they also have a massage function which keeps them nice and supportive over longer drives as well. Now, this particular car has been optioned with an Alcantara steering wheel with red stitching. It certainly looks cool and feels cool. I usually issue a warning here not to get Alcantara steering wheels because they wear quite poorly and they're really something that you want in your race car as opposed to a road car. This vehicle actually has 11,000 kilometers on the clock, which is rare for a press car. So it gives us an insight into how a vehicle that has been flogged, to tell the truth, will age over many more kilometers than that. And you can see this Alcantara wheel is already wearing away here on the left side. So I'd probably stick with the lovely perforated leather steering wheel you get in this car, as that material just ages much better. Your hands have a lot of oils in them. Alcantara doesn't really play well with that, to tell the truth. Now, we do have shortcut buttons on the wheel, which have that classic Audi clickiness, super nice. You can put a full navigation screen in front of you. You can get satellite mapping with this car's data connection. You can see your media, telephone, and information about your drive all really well. And I think Audi still do the best digital instrument clusters in the car industry. Over here, we have a 10-inch touchscreen. It's snappy, it's got a good processing power behind it. What we don't have is the old rotary dial we used to get on the RS5, and that's a bit of a shame. However, this car has a lovely Bang & Olufsen 3D premium sound system. That sounds good. Trim here is carbon fiber. Lots of different choices that you can go for, particularly if you do something like a factory order, but I don't mind it. It is real carbon fiber, and this is an Audi RS car, so, you know, I guess it sort of makes sense. In terms of material quality elsewhere, we have a soft dash, soft doors, Alcantara inserts, leather door grabs. You know, it all feels suitably premium and suitably expensive in here. We've got cup holders, wireless phone charging underneath this adjustable armrest, and an Alcantara shifter as well if you go for the Alcantara wheel, plus real metal paddles for the 8-speed torque converter automatic gearbox. So up front, I think it's satisfying. One thing it's missing is cooled seats, which in summer with this black interior, you'll be wanting that for sure. Next up, we're going to have a look at the back seat of this car. Firstly, I'm going to show you how it works with a couple of baby seats. which you actually can fit. The only compromise being if you want to put the backwards facing capsule on the curb side of the vehicle, then the passenger seat has to be some way forward, though I actually do still fit in it. Getting someone in between those two baby seats is going to be very difficult in the RS5, but for 2 adults and 2 small children, this car actually does work. All that work getting baby seats in and out of the RS5 does leave you a little sweaty on a muggy day like today, but I think the main point is that this car's form factor actually makes it quite doable. You do have to bend down a bit because of the low roofline, but the Sportback boot means that doing the top tether aspect here in Australia is actually quite simple, definitely better than it would be in a sedan, if not quite as good as a wagon or an SUV. Anyway, if you've got adults here in the back, they'll find that the back seat is comfortable and spacious. Legroom, even behind myself over there in my driving position, is okay in this car. Toe room's all right. Headroom is fine. I've got about another inch. I'm 6 foot. And you can even get your armrest down, even with a little friend over here, which has cup holders integrated into it. It has a flock-lined bit of storage. We've got 2 more USB ports. We've got air vents and a separate climate zone. A 12-volt socket, map pockets in both of the front seats, and soft touch materials in these beautiful pillarless doors. Moving around the back of the RS5, you get a sense of how long and low this Sportback is. The RS5 sits at the top of the tree. There is an S5 underneath it, identifiable by quad tailpipes, or quad tips at least. That car has a 3-litre V6. This has the sort of bespoke Audi Porsche 2.9 V6, and it just has 2 big oval outlets, as is the way for Audi's RS cars. Now this one has a black styling kit. It's got black wheels, it's got Nardo grey. Design is subjective, but for me, all that stuff is just a bit done, and I think I would probably do a factory order of an RS5 in a slightly more interesting colour combination. It's sort of blending into this rainy day today. But what you can't argue with is the practicality of that, the power tailgate that you get on the Sportback. 480 litres of space in this boot. As you can see, it is nice and easy to put suitcases in. In fact, all 3 of the chasing car's suitcases get into this boot really without too much effort at all. We do have this nice stainless steel finisher here to protect the paintwork. We've got netting off to the left and the right. We've got a net on the floor itself, and beneath the boot floor, we actually have a collapsible space saver spare, which is, not as good as a full-size alloy, but on a vehicle like this, it's certainly better than nothing. So what's it going to cost you to run an Audi RS5 Sportback? Well, performance cars like this aren't cheap to maintain, particularly if you intend to track the car, which I actually have done in this vehicle at Phillip Island, which is a really fast track here in Australia, and it's entirely capable of doing it. But if that's your thing, then brakes and tyres are going to be an expendable that you'll need to calculate, for how much this vehicle is really going to cost. If that isn't so much your bent, the right thing to do would be to buy an Audi service plan up front. That costs $3,240 for the first 5 years and 75,000 kilometers of ownership, which is actually quite reasonable considering everything mechanical happening under the skin of this vehicle. Now the warranty on the RS5, like all new Audis, is only 3 years for unlimited kilometers here in Australia. A lot of other brands have now moved to 5 years, including Mercedes-Benz, including Lexus, Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo. It's really just BMW and Audi that are holding out. So if you're negotiating to buy this car, insist that you're given a 5-year warranty, or you're going to go down the road and buy a C63. And lastly, in terms of fuel consumption, this vehicle requires premium petrol, of course, and in our testing, we've managed to get sort of 11 or 12 litres per 100 Ks without having to try too hard. For 331 kilowatts, I'm happy with that. So, what's it like driving the Audi RS5 Sportback? Well, the simple answer is a pleasure. This is a great car to look at, to sit in, but also to drive, mainly because of the balance Audi has been able to strike between comfort and compliance, which is really, really difficult when this is a vehicle designed to accelerate from 0 to 100 in 3.9 seconds. and to be able to lap tracks with reasonable ferocity. So why don't we start with what's under the bonnet and what makes an RS5 an RS5. And it's because this car has a 2.9 litre twin turbocharged V6 petrol engine with a 48 volt mild hybrid system. And while it actually has less capacity than the S5, which uses a 3 litre petrol single turbo V6, this is a special engine, no doubt about it. It's also found in a bunch of Porsche products. It's starting to propagate through the more bespoke end of the Volkswagen Group performance car lineup, and it makes 331 kilowatts of power and 600 newton meters of torque here in the RS5, which is definitely sufficient. It is less power than you'd get in a Mercedes-AMG C63 with its 4 litre twin turbo V8 in particular, but it's certainly enough to shift this car with some pretty serious aggression, both off the line, where the 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission basically gets its shit together pretty quickly, but also in terms of in-gear acceleration, overtaking on the highway is just completely effortless in the RS5. And you know, it'll keep up with much smaller, lighter cars because of the brute force of the 2.9 up front. But of course, as with pretty much every fast Audi apart from that rear drive R8, the ace up its sleeve is the Quattro system. And if you think that that kind of makes this car inert and boring, then you probably need to update your thinking forward by about 15 years, because the Torsen style all-wheel drive system used in this car, which is branded as Quattro, is the serious one that Audi uses, with the ability to send effectively all available torque rearward, but its normal default position is 60-40 rear. So this car is, effectively always more rear drive than it is front drive, and that's certainly the sensation you get. It doesn't feel like there's 25% of available torque going to every wheel at all. It feels like you're getting a distinct push from the rear end, and that's one way the RS5 and S5 differ from the 4-cylinder Audi A5 Sportback. That car has a Haldex type all-wheel drive system, which is actually front-wheel drive at very light throttle application. At very light throttle application in something like an S5 or an RS5, this vehicle is, more rear drive than front drive. So hopefully that boils it down to something a little bit more understandable. The effect of all that is that you've got real push out of bends, and if you're brave enough to disable the stability control and really get into the torque that this car has available, power oversteer is actually possible. All of which I assume is slightly amusing with the view that you may be able to see behind me with 2 baby seats. I'm actually not a family man yet. But hey, I guess I'm busting myths that you need an RSQ8, because you probably don't. Now, the ride and handling of this car is really, really livable. The handling is sharp, the steering is quick, mid-weighted, it's not ridiculously heavy. You can dial up the weight if that's what you like, but the ratio through this little steering wheel is just perfect. Lovely tactile paddles behind it. Not that you really need them, because the logic of the auto sport mode is pretty much bang on. Now, the ride is actually quite soft in comfort, which for the kind of banged up roads that we have here in Australia is ideal, because it basically keeps wheels on the ground for more of the time, meaning that you're able to actually dispatch the outputs of the engine, which is always nice. You can really stiffen it up. There's a significant difference between the softest setting and the firmest setting of the suspension in the RS5. So for track work, or if your favorite country road has just been relayed or something, you can do that. But as you can probably see from the bouncing here, the road I'm on now hasn't recently been relayed, and so a bit more compliance is very much appreciated, but the control is really still there. I think there is probably a little bit too much softness in it in the very softest setting, but I think it's still a more acceptable balance than what you get in something really firm like a C63. I know they softened that car in its facelift, but it's still pretty darn firm. I think this is actually a better balance for Australia, and you can hear as you lift off the throttle there's sort of muted pops coming from this car's pretty serious exhaust. We've also got massive brakes, front and rear. You can see in this shot the size of those brakes are just enormous. Really good positive feedback from the brake pedal as well. Visibility out is pretty good. The C-pillars are fairly serious, but thankfully the mirrors are decently positioned and sized so you actually can see okay. Something like a camera-based blind spot monitoring system would be even better. But this car has pretty strong lane keep, and if you turn it off, it stays off the next time you start the car, which is very much appreciated. We've got adaptive cruise control, we've got blind spot monitoring, we have, you know, a pretty good safety suite on this vehicle, including AEB and reversing AEB as well. So all in all, it feels like a complete package, really quick, you know, both on paper but also everywhere in the real world. This engine has so much flexibility, but importantly for me, it actually rides well too, meaning that you're likely to want to drive this car all the time, not just for seeking out a good road, although it is great for that, but it's also just happy to sit in traffic and be a pussycat. And for the sort of lives most of us actually lead, that makes a lot of sense. So those are my opinions on the Audi RS5 Sportback. This is a highly accomplished performance car. It's incredibly comfortable and luxurious to drive every day, which is not something we can say about every single vehicle in this segment. In particular, the suspension setup is clearly superior to that in the AMG C63 and new BMW M3 if you actually plan to use this vehicle for anything like commuting. Those other cars are extremely firm in order to enable excellent handling. But the RS5 still has that handling which is way above the average, and yet the damping is just beautiful in this car. The interior is high quality, it's spacious enough to get a couple of baby seats into it if you have to, and that sportback shape at the back means it's quite practical too. It is expensive, it is an indulgence. I'm certainly not going to avoid that fact, particularly if you spec it up with an interesting color combination, potentially a special order color. But if you're going to go the whole hog, spend over 150 grand on a car like this, you do want to make it completely yours. I'm keen to know your view though. Would you consider an RS5? Let me know below this video. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.